I'm sure we're all familiar with who Harry Styles is. And if you're not, here's a picture of him as a reference. He's a famous singer who is widely supported by millions of followers because of his support for the LGBTQ plus community and his bold fashion statements. As you can see, he embraces a lot of bright colors and fun patterns in the way he dresses and is constantly pushing the boundaries of masculine fashion. Another example would be Haley Steinfeld, who is also a singer and she's an actress. And you can see her wearing a suit in the first picture and a blazer over a sweatshirt in the second. And she's dressed in a way that doesn't show off her body as most feminine fashion would do. And these are both visuals of celebrities who are trying to redefine gender, which is really prominent in the fashion industry. With those pictures, it's obvious that gender doesn't belong to a specific piece of clothing, because gender itself is a social construct. The constant change in fashion for men and women throughout history and modern day gender fluidity. Yes, these may be celebrities who are dressing up to attract a larger audience, but it also just reveals how normalized it is for people to dress in different ways that are constantly pushing society's boundaries on clothing, and just embraces how people should feel comfortable in what they wear. And feeling comfortable in the clothes that you wear is so important because it can affect the way you act and feel. Feeling and the connection that we have to clothing is just an extension of our own personality that the rest of the world gets to see. The first issue I want to address is how gender is a social construct. It promotes a power dynamic between men and women when they are placed into specific gender roles and show men as a more dominant or serious authoritative figure, and women are more of the fun and like almost a trophy. Like their main role is just to be visually appealing to their audience as an accessory to a man. According to the World Health Organization, gender refers to the characteristics that define a person into a specific gender role, which is socially constructed. So I'm sure we all know someone who doesn't conform into these specific gender roles, whether they be trans or non-binary or anything else. And we leave those people out when we are defining clothing through gender. And even those who are cisgendered and identify with the sex they were given at birth may not feel comfortable in wearing clothing that belongs to that specific gender, such as like very form-fitting clothes for girls who are afraid to like show a lot of their body, and for men who just want to be able to express themselves more through clothing without having to feel pressured from everyone else to dress differently. So why is there a need to put labels on clothing? This leads me to my second point about the purpose of clothing, because until the 1700s, both men and women wore extravagant dresses to define their social class to the public. And it wasn't until the 19th century that gender roles were becoming more strict and began to define gender based on the clothing being worn by men or women. So according to the UK essay's History of Gender in Fashion, pink suits, gold and silver jewelry, and embroidered shirts, everything that's now considered feminine, were considered very masculine regardless of the choice of color or accessories that were worn with it. And so the idea that clothing was made to differentiate social classes invalidates the idea that it belongs to a specific gender as well, because that wasn't its original purpose. So society has a funny way of telling us how to look or act or even think, and we all just accept this. But if you think about it, if the idea of gender in clothing were reversed, where men wore more flamboyant dresses and women wore more masculine suits, would you still be dressed the way you are right now? We all have this pressure from everyone around us to dress in a certain way and this is due to the way we were raised. But we have to remember that there's no right or wrong way when it comes to how you identify yourself. And lastly, normalizing clothing for all genders is more important now than ever, with a large amount of the population coming out as trans or non-binary or anything other than cisgender. According to Vogue's, there's more at stake with the fashion's gender fluid movement than you realize. More than ever, gender bending is accompanied by a growing awareness of sensitivity to the experience of trans and gender non-conforming individuals. As you can see from the way I'm dressed right now, many may consider this to be feminine or just that falls in line with how I identify with myself. But that's because I feel comfortable in how I feel and how I identify with like my own personal gender. And even I have purchased clothes from the men's section in the store and have worn those clothing pieces regularly throughout my everyday life, and no one could even tell the difference. So in the end, clothing is just clothes. Like, there's no significant meaning behind defining a gender with it. And we as a society have accepted these gender roles that we've put onto clothing. So we as a society have to change that and start allowing people to just feel comfortable in how they dress and feel happy with the way they look, no matter how it fits into your own idea of how clothing should be presented to the world. Fashion, just like any other art form, is subjective, and it's up to the artist to decide it's up to the artist to decide how they will use that medium to create something beautiful for the rest of the world to see. In conclusion, it's clear that the social boundaries placed on clothing are invalid. There are no benefits to confining people to a specific clothing piece because it impacts their own emotions on their freedom of expression. It honestly just creates this society of misogynistic ideals and promotes sexism in clothing in the fashion industries, and we should be trying to change that.